Puffins, the charismatic clowns of the sea, examining the relationship between community identity and the social construction of animals. This is my AS. My name is Megan Tuennerman, and I am a sociology and environmental studies double major. In spring of 2021, I was lucky enough to study abroad in Iceland. During my time there, I spent a month researching the Puffling Patrol on Heimaey Island. From an outsider perspective, the patrol is a method of conservation, a yearly event that helps young puffins, called pufflings, successfully make it out to sea. The community goes around at night with flashlights and finds the pufflings that have gotten lost and flown into town. They gather them up in cardboard boxes and throw them out to sea the next morning. I was immediately intrigued by the patrol and decided that researching it was an opportunity that I could not pass up. I mentioned to some Icelanders that I had befriended throughout my time in the country that I was going to Heimaey, and I was immediately told about Tolti. Tolti was a puffin who lived in Sæheimar Aquarium on Heimaey. The aquarium is now known as the Sea Life Trust Beluga Whale Sanctuary and Puffin Rescue Center, and is where I conducted my research. One mention of Heimaey and Tolti was the first thought people had, not even the devastating volcanic eruption on the island in 1973. Learning about Tolti provided me my first insight into the relationship between Icelanders and puffins. Tolti the puffin was arguably a cultural icon. I was prompted to question the ways that human societies are impacted by their relationships with animals and vice versa. What are the implications of a puffin serving as a cultural icon across a nation, and what can we learn from studying the relationship? I had experienced firsthand the impact that a singular wild puffin can have on a person, and so it was a logical extension for me to investigate the impact that puffins had on society as a whole in Heimaey. Across the globe, we see different relationships with nature. Some relationships are ones of mutual aid, while others are not. Nearly every human society is impacted by, and has a direct impact on, a species of animal, and yet, the relationship between humans and animals is rarely researched. What can we learn from an analysis of the different interactions that cultures across the globe have with animals? Before we can begin to speculate on what can be learned from human-animal relationships, though, first we must analyze the ways in which said relationships are formed. In this work, I will expand upon these ideas and analyze the factors, internal and external, that affect the relationship between community identity and the social construction of animals, and the ways in which that social construction impacts the environment. In order to understand the contemporary place of animals in societies, we have to look back at historical attitudes towards animals. The theories of Marx, Durkheim, and Mead are all central to this analysis, due to their professional devotion to understanding society during periods of transition, primarily in Western cultures. In different ways, all three theorists define human society by distinguishing humans from non-human animals, a key aspect to ensuing relationships with animals. More recently, theories such as posthumanism provide the promise of shifting our understanding of the animal-human relationship. The work of these theorists can be used to understand how conservation methods such as fortress conservation have taken hold. The effects of these historical understandings of human nature being above animal nature can be easily seen in human-animal relationships across Western culture. The themes of control and domination are seen broadly in sociological literature relating to human-animal relationships. Gender stereotypes, racialization, and the practice of othering are all ways in which individuals in society assert dominance. In addition to the well-established use of animals to establish hierarchy, human society also identifies with specific animals as a method of unification, as place-specific cultural identity is often linked with animal practices. When conservation is understood from a human-centric perspective, it is almost as if we humans are not allowed to enjoy our interactions with the wild. We must atone for the sins that we have committed in destroying wildlife and must pay for them by not enjoying a moment of rebuilding it. Fortress conservation, the primary contemporary conservation style in the United States, is a prime example of this idea. Humans and nature must not touch. Humans must not interfere with the ways of animals in any way, as only harm will come, and at base of any human-nature interaction is human selfishness. I've even witnessed individuals who take care of animals and feel a need to emphasize that the fulfillment and joy that they find in helping animals is not their primary reason for doing the job. Fortress conservation has become so widespread that guilt is felt by people who experience joy from helping others. Current Eurocentric and Western, as those are also the perspective of the theorists discussed here, understanding of conservation and the relationship with animals and land is described as fortress conservation. This version of conservation began in the United States and spread across the world in the 19th century, making the term conservation synonymous with without people. The U.S. Wilderness Act of 1964 perfectly encompasses the idea of fortress conservation, as it defines wilderness as an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. This definition is important to understand because it functions as a clear example of how historical interactions with nature have evolved into the current relationships. 19th century conservationists recognized that humans in the U.S. had made mistakes and destroyed the environment, and so their response was to claim that all human interactions with nature are bad. This, of course, is not accurate, and as part of understanding the relationship between humans and animals is keeping that U.S.-centric bias in check and recognizing that there are other forms of valid conservation. Not all human communities have contributed equally to the destruction of the environment, and not all interactions of humans and animals incur negative consequences for nature. This difference's impact on the environment is the result of many factors, but my research is focused on one: the impact of different communities' understandings of what conservation is, as well as different historical relationships with animals and nature. As is the case with many cultural ideas, it is easy for individuals to get caught up and believe that their culture's methods of conservation are the only valid methods, when in fact, that's not true. Hamey and the Puffin Patrol located there had yet to be studied from a sociological perspective, and so I set out to understand the specific relationship that the community had with puffins. How is it potentially similar and different to previous case studies? This study focused on seabird populations, primarily Atlantic puffin colonies around Hamey, Iceland, and Witless Bay, Newfoundland, Canada. The Atlantic puffins are the focus of the study due to their prevalence in tourism literature and their recognizable attributes. The project began with a focus on the Puffin Patrol on Hamey, the only inhabited island in the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago off the southern coast of Iceland. The patrol is a specific example of community-animal interaction, and thus was an ideal place to begin understanding the general connection between puffins and the community. I conducted 11 interviews with current and former residents of Hamey, all of whom had some connections to the Sea Life Trust Beluga Whale Sanctuary located on the island and or the Puffin Patrol. Participants ranged in age from approximately 30 to 70 years old, with a mix of professions and involvement in puffin traditions on the island. I used a semi-purposeful sampling method as I allowed the general manager of the sanctuary to suggest interviewees, as she knew the community. This method made the most sense as I was interested in interviewing people who were involved with the Puffin Patrol in some way, as they are the individuals who would have a deeper understanding of the origins of the patrol and, more importantly, have opinions on its function in the community. In addition to formal interviews, I conducted informal participant observation through volunteering with the animal care staff at the sanctuary and taking up residence on the island for a month, observing the island's culture. Throughout my time in Iceland, I learned about another Puffin Patrol based in Witless Bay, Canada. Witless Bay is 22 miles outside of the larger city of St. John's, Newfoundland. I made the decision that completing a comparative case study would provide a larger and clearer picture of human-animal relationships across cultural boundaries and allow me to analyze similarities and differences. I was lucky enough to receive Copeland funding, and with that, I traveled to Newfoundland for 10 days and met with a wide variety of individuals in formal and informal settings. My sampling method was a mixture of snowball sampling and convenience. I began by interviewing individuals directly involved in running the Puffin Patrol in Witless Bay, and then through suggestions from participants, interviewed researchers, professors, and tourism industry professionals. In addition, I combined participant observation with informal interviews by asking shop owners and waitstaff in St. John's about their knowledge of the puffins in the area. The relationship formed between the human and puffin populations in both areas had similarities, but also significant differences. External factors that impacted the relationships were similar in both areas, with economic influences, industrialization, and general advancement of technology aiding the transition of the relationships from primarily subsistence hunting to symbolic attachment. Internal factors such as historical understandings of human-animal relationships, i.e., how closely tied to fortress conservation and traditional Western ideas they are, and the formation of transition of traditions, or where the differences in human-animal relationships, the joy and emotional connection that the people held with the puffins, largely differed between the two areas. In Hamey, there is a significant tradition of hunting puffins, hunting to save them and hunting to kill. The tradition of hunting to kill puffins today is not simply about domination or control, but has significant ties to community unity through an importance of hunting clubs on the smaller islands around Hamey. Membership of the clubs is generational and family-driven, and a yearly dance is held at it as a community event. Hunting to save, i.e. the Puffin Patrol, is done out of joy. The most common statement was that during puffling season, adults become kids again, highlighting the intergenerational importance of the tradition. From an outside perspective, the patrol may appear as simply another conservation method, but from within, the patrol is a fact. There is no Heime without puffling season. The people of Heime cannot imagine life without the patrol, to the extent that they are very in tune with how many pufflings are found each year and what that means for the entire puffin population. When the population is down, hunting to kill is stopped, not by governmental force, but through community decision. Governmental enforcement of a hunting ban is an example of fortress conservation, and something that the government of Heime did try. But the people of Heime did not respond well. Instead, they have shown that the community is more than capable of protecting the puffin population through their own measures and decisions. In Newfoundland, the internal impacts were more closely tied to the external ones. There has been a long-standing tradition of hunting, with fishing as equally as important. And as such, there have been generations that were lost in terms of puffing traditions. The patrol in Witless Bay is linked much more directly to tourism, with the bird and whale watching community existing primarily due to the increase of tourism to the area. Individuals around St. John's also spoke of the patrol with joy, but with a tinge of surprise and amusement, not the straight matter-of-fact joy that the people of Heime held for the patrol. Ultimately, in Iceland, the patrol is intrinsically important and a keystone of the community. While the social construction of puffins changed over time, from primarily a food source to mainly a cultural symbol, the community identity that the relationship with the puffins created solidified their general importance throughout history. The impact of this established importance is that conservation of the birds is not done simply out of duty, but out of love. The people of Heime enact conservation methods without consciously doing so. Conserving the puffins is not a duty, but an integral part of maintaining their cultural identity. Without the puffins, the community lacks that unifying factor. In Canada, it has developed to be a tourist draw and a fun activity. In both areas, the puffin population is monitored and protected, and both communities engage in conservation. In Canada, local individuals are in the midst of opposing a developer's plan to build a hotel on the beach facing the island the puffins nest on. Whereas on Heime, they have built infrastructure that protects puffin nesting sites and allows people to watch wild puffins from a close but safe distance. Through case studies such as this one, on community relationships with animals outside of the United States, option for environmental awareness and conservation increase exponentially. For years, fortress conservation has been taught as the primary method of conservation in many Western and Eurocentric schools. The mutually beneficial relationship held between the people of Heime and puffins shows that there are other methods of conservation that are just as, if not more, successful than fortress conservation. The relationship between the people of Newfoundland and puffins highlights that even areas that do utilize methods of fortress conservation and that have been taught to idolize fortress conservation succeed in human-animal relationships that are mutually beneficial. It's not new for humans to help young animals in need. The puffin patrol is not a new idea or practice. Instead, it is a method of conservation that has proven to be effective at both aiding the Atlantic puffin population and providing the community of Heime with unity and joy. Thank you again to everyone who has helped me to succeed with this presentation and this project, and thank you for your time.